Alright, section 5.5 is applications of percent. So we're going to be using what we learned before in 5.6 to do these problems. So the first problem I have here says a student's cost for last semester at her community college was $2,700. She spent $378 of that on books. What percent of last semester's college costs was spent on books? Okay, so we're going to use some of those same ideas that we learned in 5.4. Namely that is means equals, of means to multiply, and the word what is my letter N. When I read this last sentence right here, it says what percent? Okay, so I already know how to get started. This is going to tell me N percent of multiply last semester's college cost. Well, last semester she spent $2,700. Was is just the past tense of is, which means equals spent on books. She spent $378 of that on books. So now again, we want to get our letter N by itself. So the first thing I want us to notice is that right now we have N percent times 2,700 equals 378. We need to do the opposite of times, which is to divide. So now I'm going to have N percent equals, I'll take my calculator, 378 divided by 2,700. 378 divided by 2,700 is 0.14. But if I change that to a percent, that should just be 14%. All right. So in my next problem that I have here, it says, in a recent year, approximately 32% of films were rated R. If 725 films were rated, how many were rated R? Okay, so the first thing I notice here, it says 32%. As a decimal, 32% would be 0.32. Then I see of. Of means to multiply. Films. How many films did we have? We had 725. Were is plural for is. Means equals. Rated R. That's the number that I'm looking for. So again, all I'm going to do now, my letter R is already by itself. It's kind of like my letter N. I'm using R because we're talking about R-rated movies. All I'm going to do is multiply 0.32 times 725, and I'm coming up with 232 movies were rated R. All right. So the next problem that I have here says the enrollment at a local college decreased by 5%. So first off, I want to think about that word decreased. Decreased means it's going down. Okay, so it says enrollment at a local college decreased by 5% over last year's enrollment of 7,640. Find the decrease enrollment and the current enrollment. Okay, so let's see if we can figure this one out here. So it's telling me that we used to have 7,640 people, and we lost 5% of that. So I want to figure out what 5% of that would be. So 5% of 7,640. So 5% as a decimal is 0.05 times 7,640. That's going to be the amount of my decrease. So I'm going to take my calculator. I'm going to take 0.05 times 7,640. I'm coming up with 382. That's how many students we lost. Now, the next question is, what's the current enrollment? Well, if we used to have 7,640, and we lost 382, now we have 7,258 students. Okay, continuing with 5.5, the next problem says, at Telluride ski area in Colorado, about 28 of the 115 total ski runs are rated easy? What percent of the runs are easy? Okay, so again, I'm going to go ahead and read this part, what percent. So what is n percent of the runs? How many runs do we have total? There's a total of 115 ski runs. How many of those are easy? 28 of them. All right, so now I want to go ahead and get my n by itself. Since I'm multiplying by 115, I'm going to go ahead and divide by 115 on both sides. That's going to leave me with n percent equals, I'm going to take my calculator now, I'm going to take 28 divided by 115, and I'm coming up with 0.2434, so I'm pretty sure we needed a round here. So let's go ahead and say, my first step is I'm going to change that to a percent. So that would be 24.34%. If I round to the nearest tenth, that should give me 24.3%. All right. The next problem here says, for each food described, find the percent of total calories from fat. Okay? If necessary, round to the nearest tenth percent. Okay, so we're trying to find the percent. So that's telling me what percent and percent of means to multiply total calories. We have 40 total calories, and 20 of them are coming from fat. So again, if I want to get my n by itself, I need to divide both sides by 40. So that gives me n percent equals, if you take your calculator, you should come up with 0.5. But if we change that to a percent, that should just give us 50%. All right. The next problem is very similar. We're still doing the same thing. We're trying to figure out how many calories are coming from fat. Okay, so I'm going to say n percent of the total calories. The total calories here is 190, and 130 of those are coming from fat. So I'm going to divide by 190 on both sides. So I have n percent equals, I'll take my calculator, 130 divided by 190, and I'm coming up with 0.6842. So if I change that to a percent, that would be 68.42%. Since it's telling me to round to the nearest tenth, that's the number right there I'm needing to round. Okay, so my question is, should I write 68.4 or 68.5? Since the number to the right of the 4 is a 2, I'm going to leave my answer as 68.4%. All right, the next problem says, a family paid $26,250 as a down payment for a home. If this represents 15% of the price of the home, find the price of the home. Okay, so when I read this problem, it says they paid $26,250 as their down payment. That's a down payment. That tells me that the home has to cost more than $26,250. Okay, so when I look at this second sentence, when it says if this, what they're referring to is they're referring to that number, 26,250, represents is another word for is. 15% as a decimal would be 0.15 of means to multiply the price of the home. I don't know how much the home costs. I'm going to call that n. So again, now if I want to solve my equation here, I want to get my letter n by itself. I need to divide by 0.15 on both sides. Oops, 0.15. So I'm going to take 26,250 divided by 0.15, and I'm coming up with 175,000 is the price of the home. All right. So the next problem I have here says, our car manufacturer announced that next year the price of a certain model of car will increase by 4.5%. This year the price is $19,286. Find the increase in price and the new price. Okay, so we're going to find the increase. So that means it's going to go up by 4.5%. So as a decimal, that's 0.045 times the price of the car, what it is now, $19,286. So I'm going to take my calculator, 0.045 times 19,286. I'm coming up with $867.87. That's how much the car is going to go up by. But now we want to find the new price. Well, we know it used to cost $19,286. If it's going up in value by $867.87, I need to add that back in to my $19,286. And so now the car should cost us $20,153.87. All right. The next couple of problems here we have deal with solving percent increase and percent decrease. So I'm going to sort of zoom in here a little bit and see if we can just focus on the percent increase problems. And that's good right there. Okay. So I'm only looking at this part right here. So the way we're going to go ahead and do this is a pretty simple process. The way we're going to figure this out is we're first going to figure out the amount of the increase. Think about this in terms of money. If we used to have $50, now we have $80, well, that means that we gained $30. Okay? Now the way we're going to find the percent increase is we're going to take that number that we just found, 30, we're going to divide it always by my original amount, 50, and I'm going to change that to a percent. So 30 divided by 50, that's giving me 0.6, but 0.6 is really the same thing as 60%. I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit so that we got enough room to see everything here. There we go. Okay. So that's going to give me, 60%. All right, let's try the same thing with the next one. From 8 to 12, it went up by 4. So I'm going to take that number 4, I'm going to divide it by my original amount, which is 0.5, and if I change that to a percent, that's 50%. Okay. The third one, from 65 to 117, if you want to figure out how much it went up by, just take 117 minus 65. That went up by 52. So I'm going to take that number 52, I'm going to divide it always by my original amount, divided by 65. I'm coming up with 0.8. Well, that's just 80%. And for the next one, from 68 to 170. So let me take 170 minus 68. That went up by 102. So again, I take that number 102 and I divide it by 68. That's 1.5, which is 150%. All right. Now, these next ones are finding percent decrease. I'm going to do this exactly the same way. What I want you to notice is that now our values are going down. If we used to have $8 and now we have $6, well, that means we lost $2. But the process is going to be the same. I'm going to take that number 2, I'm going to divide it by my original amount, 2 divided by 8 on my calculator, 0.25 as a percent, 25%. The next one I have here, from 25 to 20, it went down by 5. So I take my number 5, divide it by 25. That should give me 0.2. As a percent, that's 20%. And so for the next one I have here, from 160 to 40, that's a pretty significant drop. That went down by 120. So I'm going to take that number 120, divide it by 160, 120 divided by 160, 0.75 or 75%. And my fourth one, From 200 to 162, that went down by 38. So I take 38, divide it by 200. That should give me 0.19 or 19%. All right. So let's take a look at the next couple of problems I have here. And so we have, it says that there are 150 calories in a cup of whole milk and only 84 calories in a cup of skim milk. In switching to skim milk, find the percent decrease in the number of calories. Okay, this problem is going to be just like the ones we did before. The ones we did before I think sometimes seem easier because they're in a table, and this here is more of a word problem. So I'm going to set this up so it's in a table. When we were drinking whole milk, we were consuming 150 calories. We switched to skim milk and we went down to 84. So how many calories did we save? Well, let's subtract 150 minus 84. We saved 66 calories. So now remember, I take that number 66 and I'm going to divide it by 150. So I divide it by 150. I'm coming up with 0.44 or 44%. All right. I'll try the next one the same way. It says in 1940, the average size of a privately owned farm in the United States was 174 acres. In a recent year, the average size of a privately owned farm in the United States has increased to 449 acres. What is the percent increase? So again, first thing I want to point out, I don't need to know the number 140. It's not relevant in terms of my problem. What the numbers that are relevant are my numbers 174 and 449. So I want to know how much it went up by. 449 minus 174. It went up to 275 acres. I take that number, divide it by 174. Okay. Again, I'm coming up with a decimal, so let's go ahead and round this. So the number that I'm coming up with right now is 1.5804. If I move that 2 spaces over, that's going to give me 158%. I could put the 0.0 because that number there is a 4. It's not going to change that 0 to a 1.